Penn State fans? It's Blue White Breakdown podcast time. Johnny McGonigal and Bob Flounders here. We're taping this on a Monday afternoon. It is a squunched up week for Penn State football. They're playing Thursday night at Purdue, Fox game, 8 o'clock kick. So everything kind of got bumped up a day or two on James Franklin's very meticulous schedule. But I'm excited to have Johnny do these for us. We'll probably have them for you guys on most Tuesdays, reacting to James Franklin's news conference. Today, though, Johnny, it was an 11:15 a.m. Monday news conference. Your first Penn State in-season James Franklin news conference in a couple of years, like I want to say 3 or 4 years, but it was a doozy, John. Penn State fans know he doesn't say much, typically, during these press conferences, but late in his little news conference, he revealed on his own without prompting it's quite the depth chart gem. So why don't you take it away and let the fans know what's going on if they haven't heard about it already?
Yeah, Bob, I was used to Monday press conferences with Pat Narduzzi, and now I get a Monday press conference with James Franklin. Both coaches don't like saying anything or don't like giving any information away, but a really interesting nugget was that Drew Allar is the backup quarterback, at least against Purdue. He said, it's a fluid situation between, Christian Veilleux and Bo Prabula, obviously, also, in competition there. But really the two guys being CV and Drew Allar. It's going to be a week-by-week deal. But, yeah, he is the backup quarterback behind Sean Clifford. So if something happens to Sean Clifford in the opener against Boilermakers, it's the five-star true freshman, not Veilleux, which – look, I'm a little surprised about it. I think you're surprised about it, too. I mean, I think there's a general sense of surprise or, I don't know, shock or I don't know, whichever, adjective you want to use there, Bob. But, yeah, it's, I don't know. Veilleux came in, played well against Rutgers last year and obviously has a leg up in terms of experience with Mike Yursic's offense. But Allar, had impressed. He enrolled in January and was there for spring ball, which, obviously helps.
Yeah, so I mean, we have a couple of different things we want to get to, but we're going to talk a little bit about this. I had about 3 different thoughts once I had actually my jaw I picked it up off of the Beaver Stadium media center floor because Penn State fans know he just does not reveal much, and especially when it comes to quarterbacks. A couple of things just jump out to me. I just wonder, Johnny, because he doesn't talk about injuries. He does not talk about injuries. I wonder if Christian's 100%. But let's assume for this discussion that he is 100%, right? You could make an argument. You could try and make an argument. Well, he's trying to keep the 5-star happy. We're living in the transfer portal age. They like all 3 quarterbacks, but getting a 5-star on campus is not always the easiest thing to do at Penn State. There's only a couple of them in every class. They're trying to make them happy. But you know what? I actually shot that one down by myself because this is the opener. And, you name him the number 2. Sean Clifford has had injury issues at Penn State. If he gets hurt, this isn't just for show. I mean, Drew Allar's going to be the guy. So they must like him enough. And they must have seen enough. This is not something that is, hey, we're trying to boost his confidence and keep him happy. They would not in a season. They're 11-11 the last 2 years. They would not just do this to try and keep him happy. They must either have a real need for Drew to be the number 2 guy, or there might be something going on with Christian. But I am very surprised.
Yeah, look, the whole 5-star, keep him happy, transfer portal, that line of thinking, that was the first thing that popped in my head too. No doubt. But I do agree with you in that, and I kind of came to that conclusion too. As I was writing the story up, the wheels are turning, and I'm like, yeah, this is a Big Ten opener on the road. And James Franklin has said how many openers in the Big Ten that they've had on the road so far. This is a big game, right? I mean, this is not going to be a cakewalk by any means. I mean, you look at what Purdue has opposite them and Aiden O'Connell in that passing offense. Yeah. I mean, they can score some points. So Sean Clifford goes down, you got to be able to keep up with that. And they're not going to make a statement just to make a statement to your 5-star kid, like, hey, yeah, let's appease him real quick. No, they need a guy to be ready, and we saw what happened at Iowa last year, right? If Sean Clifford goes down, you need someone to be ready. and they feel confident that Drew Allar is that guy. Which, look, that's big for him, and I think even moving forward past this week, if he remains the number 2 guy on that depth chart, he's gonna have more reps in practice, more work with the number 2 team, which I think is big going into 2023 and even beyond that, right? Because he is what you want to be. He's your future, right? Like, you want him to be your future, and so it's a big development for him and for the Penn State program as a whole.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're on the same page with this. Let's get to some more takeaways. James, I jotted down a bunch of notes. I knew we were both going to talk about this at the start. What was maybe something else that really stood out to you that James said? Because he was asked, probably 20 questions or close to it, and not all of them were. We use a recruiting term. They weren't all 5-star answers, Johnny, but there were a couple I thought significant comments from James. So where would you want to start?
Yeah, well, I think honestly it even starts earlier than James, because we talked to Sean Clifford Monday morning, an hour or two before James Franklin. I asked Sean about the wide receiver depth, and he had mentioned Harrison Trey Wallace as a guy who's been working in with the ones. He also mentioned Malik Miega as well as a guy who has been figuring in there behind Parker Washington, Keandre Lambert-Smith, and Mitchell Tinsley. And then James Franklin was asked about that wide receiver group, and he also mentioned Wallace as a guy who has been standing out, a redshirt freshman who really could see snaps and really should see snaps against Purdue. They're not just going to run with those top 3 guys. They're going to be tapping them in and giving these guys more reps. So I think Trey Wallace is a guy who could step up and see increased snaps. Keep an eye on him on Thursday night.
Yeah, let's. I want to get to 2 of them. One that sometimes James, Johnny, even before you get to ask him a question, in his in his preamble, I guess we could call it a preamble. I wasn't good I don't know if it was history in.
It's like a soliloquy.
Yeah, his little intro where he talks about the other team and some things, people who stood out, and again, like, he doesn't usually talk specifics about schemes and stuff, but when he does, like, I always pay attention because he doesn't just do it. He's been thinking about it for him to actually blurt it out. So I was not aware of this, but I don't see a lot of Purdue because I'm always watching Penn State. But he said, you know what? He was talking about the Purdue defense, and they are not scared, Johnny, to play cover 0. And whenever I hear that term, that is a boom or bust coverage. You got to have some stones to play a lot of cover 0, Penn State fans. That just means, when against the spread offense, they're going to cover you man-to-man. They're all going to be at the line of scrimmage. There's no deep help. And there's a couple ways, if you're Penn State, you can attack that. But if they see a lot of cover 0 on Thursday night, the Penn State's going to have a chance to make some big plays. They actually created some big plays last year in the second half against Wisconsin, and that's a much better defense than Purdue. But Purdue is not known for defense, and if they're going to play cover 0, and James made it sound like they're getting ready for it. They've been getting ready for it all season. There's going to be some chances for Penn State to strike quickly.
And not only that, though, you have the opportunity to hit deep with a guy like Mitchell Tinsley coming in from Western Kentucky. He's a prime example of a player who could hit on 1 or 2 of those plays. But cover 0 also, that stresses your offensive line. Yeah. And you look at the guys who are in front of Sean Clifford, Juice Scruggs at center. He's a stabilizing force, you would hope, and Caden Wallace coming back as a starter at right tackle. But you've got new guys in there. You got fresh faces, and the offensive line has been it's been a liability really under James Franklin, really his entire tenure. And so that's why he hasn't been hyping up this group, throughout the offseason. He's been saying, we'll let their play speak for itself, essentially. And if you're going up against a team that, when you're running cover 0, when you're pressuring the quarterback, when you're leaving yourself susceptible on the back end, you're really going all out on the front end of it in the trenches and getting after it in the backfield. So that's going to be a point of contention, I think, is the offensive line an early test for that group.
Yeah, and I also think it's early in the week, but I have a very strong sneaking. I think that James Franklin feels really good about this matchup because I think what he thinks his perceived strengths are this year on offense might cause Purdue some problems because When he was talking about the run game struggles last year, it came up over and over. Yeah, they didn't commit to the run, but they also had runners who couldn't make anyone miss. Kaytron Lee is a big horse of a runner, 235 pounds, not a nimble guy. Noah Kane, even when he was healthy a couple years ago, not a nimble guy. For whatever reason, Devin Ford was supposed to be a nimble guy. It has not showed up, and he's now in his fourth year. Johnny, all I've heard about from James Franklin this offseason are those two January enrollee running backs, Nick Singleton and Kaytron Allen. We got a lot. We heard a lot from James Franklin on Kaytron Allen today, but without fail, when he talks about them and he praises them, and it's not just him, it's their ability to break tackles and their ability, even Kaytron Allen, to make people miss in the hole, even when the offensive line doesn't get everything blocked. If they got to make one guy miss or they got to run over one guy, he is convinced they're the guys to do it. And you talked about cover zero. So even if the offensive line has its hands full and they can't get everyone blocked, Penn State may finally have not one but two runners who can generate some big plays, and that is when there's somebody waiting for them in the hole.
Yeah, and you don't have to look far to find people hyping up Nick Singleton and Kaytron. Fat Man Allen is his nickname. You don't have to look far. Like we mentioned, James Franklin today talked a lot about that. We talked to Jaywan Sider, the running backs coach, last week about Nick Singleton and his home run hitting ability. And Sider said it makes a running back coach look pretty good when you've got a guy that can go 95 on any play. And he was saying even in the spread offenses these days, you as a running back, you think sometimes these holes are going to be massive. When in reality, he said for these two freshmen, the holes that the offensive line opens up doesn't have to be that big with how quickly they hit it, and they'll run through you and around you, and the speed to break away, especially with Singleton. And so, I think there's going to be opportunities in the run game too, not just in the pass game for these two freshmen, then Kaytron Lee as well. Do you think Kaytron Lee ultimately takes the first snap? I feel like he does, and then obviously the freshman will get worked in.
Yeah, with Sider, I mean, he had a really good running back room in 2019. It was better. It never really. I mean, Journey Brown was actually the fourth guy, I think, at the start of the season, and he was the best guy by the end of the year. But he had the medical issue that cost him, the rest of his career. He's going to be okay. But they love Noah Kane. They love Devin Ford. They had Ricky Slade, who was in his second year. He was a 5-star recruit. And what he did then and what he did last year is, I don't know if they were trying to keep guys happy, but he wants to play three, right? So it's pretty clear this year that Devin Ford is actually the fourth guy. It's going to be some combination of Kaytron Lee. It's going to be it's going to be the two freshmen, Singleton and Kaytron Allen. And typically, what Sider has done is he's given the starter 2 series, then he's given the number 2 guy 2 series, and then he's given the third back 1 series, and then they kind of look and see what they think they have and how the thing's going and how they're blocking it, and then they kind of adjust from there. But I would imagine Lee is probably going to start. I don't think they're going to wait too long to get Singleton in the game. But boy, Johnny, I think Singleton is the real deal. I really do. But I think Penn State feels like they might have got they got a 4-star in Kaytron Allen, but I think they feel even better that he's even better than just maybe a 4-star because I mean Franklin basically said he was the star of August camp, and everyone considers him to be just a power runner, but he's got a lot more to his game. He's actually smaller than Nick Singleton if you look at the depth chart. So I'm very anxious to see this running game, this offensive line, and those two freshman runners. But I do think you're going to see 3 runners. But if the game's close, eventually you got to settle on 1, maybe 2 guys.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we talked earlier about how you don't name Drew Allar the backup quarterback just to appease a 5-star guy. Well, you don't hand it off to 3 or 4 backs just to do it, just to make them happy, especially in an opener against a Big Ten team. You'll get those 3 guys we talked about really worked in early, but then at some point you got to settle on one guy, and that's a long-term thing too. You would hope that to have one guy emerge and really force you to make a decision. But in that game Thursday night, I mean, if Nick Singleton is carrying the rock like crazy, or Kaytron Allen, or Kaytron Lee, if he's doing the job for you, you got to settle in and really ride that hot hand because this is not a Purdue team you want to mess around with.
Yeah. We're talking a lot about Penn State's offense here on the Blue White Breakdown podcast. It's Purdue week. Johnny McGonigal and Bob Flounders. Johnny, I thought there was one interesting aspect of the Penn State defense and the Purdue offense. I know that you actually asked a question about that a little bit later, but before we get to what you asked James, he was asked about why Jeff Brom is every year. They're not necessarily a program that lands a lot of blue chip skill position guys. But he is clearly a great offensive mind, and every year he finds a quarterback that he can win with. And by the end of the year, he's got amazing stats. And they always have a couple of wideouts that play in the NFL. I know there's a couple. Rondale Moore is one. David Bell from last year is another. The perception is that they were a little bit thin at wideout coming into this game, but they hit the transfer portal pretty hard. And there's going to be some wideouts that are ready to go. James Franklin said, what stands out to him about Jeff Brom and his offense is he's very, very good at pushing the ball down the field, taking deep shots when it's the right time, getting the matchups he wants, and he always finds a quarterback that can put the ball where it needs to be. And the reason I bring it up is, the matchup of Purdue's passing offense against Penn State's corners and safeties on the defensive side for Penn State, to me, I don't know that the pass rush is necessarily going to get home a lot against a veteran quarterback, but these coverage guys are going to be put to the test.
Yeah, and we're expecting Manny Diaz to run a lot of 4-2-5 against Purdue offense that, like you said, likes to push the ball downfield. Last year, they ranked 13th in the country with passes of 20 yards or more downfield, and that's Aiden O'Connell connecting with his receivers. David Bell was a big part of that, 93 catches, over 1,200 yards last year. He's in the NFL for a reason. Right now, the Blitnikoff Award finalist, so they don't have him anymore. But yeah, they've got confidence in a couple of Iowa transfers they got in, and it's going to be difficult on Joey Porter Jr., on Daquan Hardy in the slot. You look at even at safety, obviously, Jair Brown is back and tied the national lead last year with interceptions, but you don't have Brisker, Jaquan Brisker, and so that's hard. That's gonna be difficult. He's out there making plays with the Chicago Bears in preseason, having himself a nice, really preseason, and you don't have him on your back end. And again, safety combinations are one of those iffy things, especially early in the season. That it takes time. Zakee Wheatley seems like he's going to be the guy that will start opposite Tig Brown, but at the same time, even though he is, he was your takeaway king in the spring, he was a takeaway king in fall camp. That's practice, right? That's not going against Aiden O'Connell and this Purdue offense. It really likes to stress the safeties in the corner, so it's a different challenge.
Yeah. And let's wish Jaquan Brisker well. I think he busted his thumb up pretty good. I don't know how much time he's going to miss, but I'm with you. I watched the highlights of his first two games. They played the Chiefs and somebody else, and he was flying around that field, and he was getting there in a very bad mood. So hopefully he doesn't miss too much time. But you take Jaquan Brisker was a standout when they won at Wisconsin in Week 1. Arnold Ibiketti was a standout. They don't have him either. So Franklin keeps talking about the depth and how he feels good about it, and we're back to where we need to be. I don't think he would keep saying that if he didn't really believe it, because the team's 11-11 and he can't afford. He's pulled back on the offensive line, right? He's not going to praise them. So that means they're deep just about everywhere else if he likes the team's depth. I think he must feel good about the defensive ends. I'm not sure about the linebackers, but then again, I don't know how many times we're going to see three on the field. But I think the corners, safeties, and the defensive line are really where Penn State's going to have to hang its hat on defense early in the season. Let's get to a couple notes, positional notes. We mentioned Allar as the number two quarterback, which is surprising. Trey Wallace, who you mentioned, he almost considers him a number one. I thought that was interesting. He wouldn't even commit to 6 receivers. He said, we got 5. Malik Mega is the other one to go with the starting 3. So I think they're going to play 5, and the subs will only play when the starters are tired. I think you're going to see a lot of multiple tight end sets because they definitely like those guys. I still think they need to play better. But he did say Elston is the guy at middle linebacker, even though he said both are going to play. We'll see. He did break down some of the kicking. He said Jake Pinniger's won the field goal job. Probably not a big surprise. Barney Moore is the punter. I think there was some social media about him getting a scholarship, obviously last week. You mentioned, Eli Manning is the guy that's kind of made the social media circles. He was up at State College. They got to use two different kickoff guys. But I also did think that he did talk about Hunter Norzad as being almost like a third starter at one of the guard spots. To me, that means he's probably not going to start, but he's going to play both left guard and right guard. And then Chop Robinson, he feels like he's a starter, even though they're probably going to go with Tarburton and Adisa Isaac. So starting to get a little bit better of an idea of what Penn State is going to be working with early in the season, early in this game. Anything else for you jump out, whether it was something he said, something he didn't say, somebody he didn't really mention? Was there anything for you that really stood out?
No, I think the one thing I was going to mention was the Chop Robinson deal with him saying, starter, basically him playing starter snaps, because I would go back to Micah Parsons' first year, right? He didn't start at linebacker, but he played starter snaps. He was in there a lot, and I know James likes to defer to his seniors sometimes, so you'll see Nick Tarburton out there at defensive end opposite Adisa Isaac, but Chop Robinson, after transferring over from Maryland, is going to play a lot of ball for them this year, and he's going to be important. Like we talk about, Purdue's offense and not only their ability to push the ball downfield. You want to get in the backfield and disrupt that. But I asked Franklin today about Purdue's tempo.
Right.
They ran the fifth most plays among FBS teams that played fewer than 14 games. So the teams that basically didn't make the playoffs or a conference title game, they're churning out plays. And you got to churn in. You got to rotate your guys in to match that. And so you're going to be going into the 2, even 3 deep on the defensive line specifically. Those boys get tired. So you're going to see, Chop Robinson. You're going to see, Zane Durant at defensive tackle. You're going to see these guys play.
Yeah, and I think earlier in the season it's a bigger deal, especially in the heat, right? I'm sure it's not easy to play against a Temple offense when it's cold either. But I do think early on, Braum has had the whole summer to game plan for this game in particular. It's a huge game for both teams, really. You don't want to start 0-1 with a loss like this in a toss-up game. Last I looked, Penn State's still favored by about 3.5, which is surprising to me a little bit. But you know what? We'll see how it plays out. It's a blackout at Ross-Ade Stadium for whatever that's worth. I don't even know how many people are going to be at the game. It's not that big of a stadium, but tempo on both sides is going to be a key. I think that, and when you have 2 sixth-year quarterbacks, man, I just, without getting into any predictions because it's a little early, I don't see any. Johnny, I just feel like one of these guys is going to have to win the game in the final 4 or 5 minutes because, I mean, this is kind of why they stuck around. They have to have mastered the offense. I mean, second or third year for Aiden in Braum's offense, and Sean Clifford at year 2 in Mike Yursich's offense. He's not lacking in skill position talent. To me, this does feel like it's going to be a close game. And even if Penn State gets its running game going late in the game, if they're down 6 or Purdue's down 6, one of these guys is going to have to make the play. And the guy that doesn't, it's a tough way to start your last season.
Yeah, and look, you talk about it being a blackout at Ross-Ade Stadium. Last time I was there, last time Penn State played at Purdue, it was a rainy, crappy day in 2016, and Penn State put up like 62 points, I think.
It was a game until like late in the third quarter, and they ran off like 30 straight points, and I was like, what just happened?
It was a blur, and it was the week after the Ohio State upset. I don't think you're going to get 62-24, whatever it was at the time. It's going to be a tight ball game. It's going to be one that goes into the fourth quarter, and like you said, these are the opportunities and games that Sean Clifford came back to play, and for his sake, hopefully he stays healthy throughout the entire season. But to be able to open up with this one, a Big Ten game, it's just so important, and it really sets a tone. I mean, this game and the Auburn game, within your first 3 games of the year, you can start off 3-0 and you'll be riding a wave, going into Big Ten play. I mean, if you're 1-2, it's a completely different story. So this is such a huge game for them.
Johnny, one last thing, and I always get a kick out of it because I like how he deadpans it and he thinks, but have you picked up on the fact that James is not happy that Penn State has opened on the road in Big Ten play? This will be the 7th straight year, and 12. I think it's 11 out of the last 12 or 12 out of the last 13. Have you picked up on the fact he's not real happy about that?
Yeah, it's certainly with the number of times he's mentioned it. Certainly, you can tell He is not happy with it. I mean, he mentioned it in his opener today at his press conference. When I was watching from my couch, you were there out in Indianapolis for Big Ten Media Days. He mentions it in his opening as well there.
Yeah.
I don't blame him for not being happy about it. We've talked about this a bunch off air too. Don't blame him at all. But yeah, he is he's not pleased.
Yeah, I will say this. They have, especially the last 3 years, it's not only has it been the Big Ten opener, it's been the season opener. They lost that incredible game at Indiana in 2020 that they had them in regulation, and somehow they let them off the hook. Then last year they did win at Wisconsin, and now they got to go. Now they got to go to Purdue. Of those three venues, though, I mean, if you're going to open on the road in Big Ten play, I know Purdue is a good team that won 9 games last year, but it's still, I think facing the Wisconsin defense in week 1 maybe and that running game is a little bit more formidable of an environment than Purdue. But this one is, for other reasons, this is a challenging matchup. And the other thing I just want to say before we get, and you probably want to chime in as well, I'm really excited to see Manny Diaz match wits with Jeff Brom, because I do think as big of a test as it is for Penn State, because it's Jeff Brom and he gets more, he seems like he gets more out of his talent than maybe any team on offense in the Big Ten. I think not knowing what Manny Diaz is going to do with the kind of athletes that Penn State has, that could probably be a little bit daunting, I think, for Purdue as well.
Yeah, and Jeff Brom is such a creative guy on the offensive end. So to see Manny Diaz, match wits with him, and this is Manny Diaz's first game as defensive coordinator at Penn State. He's going to be on the sidelines making the calls. Is Penn State going to have a turnover chain of some sort? They're going to do something fun on the sidelines if they pick off Aiden O'Connell. It's something we'll have to keep an eye on.
Yeah, fair. Knowing James Franklin just a little bit, I would be. Well, I was stunned today, Johnny, with the Drew Allar noise. So I'm just going to shut up. For all I know, that maybe they do have. Maybe they're going to let the kids they're going to turn it loose this year, and they're going to let them have fun with something that's similar to the turnover chain. But boy, that would be something to see from a James Franklin coach team. He's really big about no showboating and all that other stuff. But I don't know. He has already shocked me once with his backup quarterback reveal. So who knows what's coming on Thursday. But Johnny and I will be out at Ross-Ade Stadium, West Lafayette, joined by, as always, Dave Jones, Joe Hermit. Hopefully our travel will go okay. But I'm really excited about Thursday night, 8 o'clock, Fox. I think it's Gus Johnson. So that's even another thing Penn State fans can look forward to. And Johnny, I know you're excited as well.
I can't wait. I really can't wait. And Thursday night, when I go back and rewatch the game and hear Gus Johnson on the call, it's always a signal that college football is back. But when you hear Gus Johnson yelling and screaming about a 2nd and 6 carry for 4 yards, it's going to be great.
Yeah. All right, Penn State fans, we will be back after the game to share our thoughts. But I hope you enjoy it. We've enjoyed our Monday morning with James Franklin, so we look forward to talking with you all season.